Hello everyone, and what this tutorial is going to be focusing on is what's called component type options. We are going to quickly look at how to go into the inner workings of polygonal objects, how they can be manipulated, and also some other options that will hopefully be a nice bridge before we get into polygonal modeling tools. Okay, so a couple important elements. Each object that we have here is in what's called object type mode. You can usually find the name that's over here. Yep, object type. And this is basically when we select the entire mesh as a whole or any other submeshes that might be related to these. Now, in terms of what we can do with this is, well, as you saw before, move it left to right, side to side, up and down. Also, while in this mode, we can go into the channel box layer editor and rename these. Now, that's an important thing to do as soon as possible. So I'm going to call this demo underscore sphere. I'm going to call this demo underscore box. And I'm going to call this one demo, demi apparently, demo underscore cylinder. All right. Now it's important that you guys name everything if possible, mostly because of organization. If you end up having a few objects in your scene, it's not too bad. But if you guys go to Windows and an option called Outliner, you can see exactly how many objects are in your scene. And I'll tell you, when it starts having hundreds, possibly thousands of different objects, you'll definitely be happy that you labeled them all specifically. And yeah, all of them seem to be organized pretty well, including cameras and any kind of default options. So if you want to get rid of the outliner, you just hit the little X over here and closed. And again, to get the outliner again, to see what's in your scene, Windows, Outliner, and just click it. Now, again, the type of mode that we're going to be getting into is what's called component type. And again, this is basically going to get into the inner workings of the mesh of choice. Now, we're going to look at this through the box just because there's fewer polys and it's going to be a little easier to demonstrate. So check this out. If you right click and hold, and again, this is on the right mouse. It's one of the reasons why you need a 3-button mouse when you're using Maya. You can get into any of these options at any time. Now, what each of these do is different methods of selection or viewing. Now we're going to look at the first option here, which is called vertex mode. Now in vertex mode, and by the way that you know that this is working is if all of a sudden the color changes from green to what we have over here. And this will allow us to select individual points. Now what these points will allow us to do is move our mesh, or this part of the mesh, up and down, left and right, forward and back, or wherever. And also a little important nugget, you can actually select multiple elements at the same time, or multiple vertices at the same time. So I can select both these vertices, or if I select a vertice, hold shift next to it, or double click next to it, usually should select it immediately. And if it doesn't, I believe it's actually supposed to be edges. My apologies about that. Again, I get there by right clicking, select edge, and this will actually select 2 edges simultaneously. If I hold shift and double click there, now it's working appropriately. Apologize about earlier. And yeah, you can even double click this and it's selecting like so. Okay. And also if you select an edge, like what we have over here, and a perpendicular edge right next to it, double click that, you'll select in a ring-like fashion. Also very useful when you're going to be doing anything like connect components, something we're going to be going over a little bit later. So again, right click and hold, vertex selects a little point, and right click and hold, select edge, and that'll select, in a way, 2 different points at the same time. And by the way, each of these have different tools that are available, but we'll get into that later. Now if you right click and hold and select face, you'll be able to actually select the face, or the 4 sides of an edge, or 4 verts, depending on how you see it, of your mesh of choice. Now this is going to be the method we can use for extrusion, a polygonal modeling tool that we can get into later. And we can basically move more of our geometry a little bit easier using this method. So overall, just a good way to go. Now, also also a little important safety tip. If you double click a polygon like so, you'll select the whole thing, or you'll select the whole element. So good things to know there. Also note that while holding shift, you could basically select multiple faces, and also need to know, if you want to, you can actually rotate to move the faces, or you can use the scale to make the faces bigger or smaller. Now, unlike the other scale, which if we right click and hold and go to object mode, you'll notice that the scale option that we covered in the last tutorial basically duplicates the size. If we select the face and select all these, or any other kind of component type, it basically leaves the original scale unchanged. And this is going to be useful later on for modeling purposes. And also we can get some interesting shapes using this technique. And this is going to be a stepping stone to polygonal modeling, which we'll be doing later. Okay. Now, if you guys want to get back to the original object type, like what I just did previously, if you right click and hold, go to object type, it'll get us back into the default selection type. And again, if I go to any other object, right click and hold, and select face or vertex or edge, it'll let me select each of those selection types. Now, little safety tip that you guys should know. The more polygons that you have, as you can see here, the more detail potentially you can use. But the only problem is it potentially can be a little bit more trickier to control. So once again, I usually recommend working with a lower polygon first and working your way up. Now, also a little safety tip that I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of is if you select any object, right click and hold, vertex face, this will actually show you all the faces or four-sided polys as if they weren't being connected together. So if for some reason you right click and hold and you accidentally select this instead of vertex, it basically means that you're just basically on vertex face mode. Not a problem. And also can be helpful later on for checking your geometry to make sure everything's on the up and up. Right click and hold, vertex face. There we are. Now, also important thing is if a person wants to, they can also choose an option called multi to select a combination of faces, edges, and vertices. Now, I have to admit, I'm not the biggest fan of using this method, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't know what that does. And that's basically what it is. I selected a face, two edges, and a vertice all at the same time, and that's basically why we're seeing this change the way that we are. Not too bad. And again, you go to object mode, you go back to normal. Now, there is one area that I did not talk about too much, that's the UV option. That's going to be going over a little bit later when we get into surfaces. But let's talk one last thing that's going to be also helpful, particularly if you work with a higher poly count like the sphere, and that is an option called soft selection. Now for this, we're going to need to dive a little deeper into Maya. But the good news is this is a video tutorial, so you can rewind this at any time. So first thing I need to do is I need to either double click the move, rotation, or scale. So if I double click the move tool, yep, there we are, you're going to see a lot of options available to you. Things like the move settings, and just a quick description of this. Basically, each of these options will move this in a specific way. So this is going to work more on a local way. In other words, it'll basically have arrows or rotations kind of work based on the individual vertice, poly, and so on. While the world kind of goes in a world-like aesthetic when it comes to the manipulations and so on. But that's not what we really need to change. And by the way, I got here by hitting, again, double-clicking the move tool. But what we want to do is choose an option called soft selection. Now, this is a neat little tool that on the component type of vertex, edge, or face, let's select face, will allow you to select more than just one face as you move. In the sense of, since I have this polygon face turned on, it'll be able to let you select with a fallout on it. So this basically kind of moved over like so. Ooh, almost crashed there for a second. And it moves everything else with it. But the neat thing about this is it kind of has a fall off effect on it. So anything that gets further away from this polygon face basically means it's pulled in a little bit of a weaker aesthetic. Now this can be adjusted and changed by going to the soft selection and choosing the fall off radius, because right now it's at about a value of 5. If I want this to be stronger, I could put this to 10 and select, well, almost the whole sphere. Or if I want this to be weaker, I could put this at 3 and we only get maybe barely a quarter. But the nice thing about this is it basically makes it so we don't have to select multiple faces, and it also basically makes a smoother transition. And it's definitely far more noticeable when you're working with something that's a higher polygon count. Now if you want to change how the soft selection works, I'll actually put this back to 5 again so we can see more of that. We also have some preset options, things like the curve preset we can basically keep at the default, or we can try some other settings here, and each will move and change this in a different fashion. Some of them do act a little bit weird, but if you ever need to go back to the default, just select the first one, you should be good. And of course, which one of those you choose will be completely dependent on your needs. That's pretty much most of the stuff I wanted to show. And if you ever need to get back into the channel box layer editor, you can either select the tab in the right area like so, or hit Control A. And right now we're in attribute editor. We'll get back to that in a bit, but we can hit Control A again, and we're back to our default setting. Again, important thing to always remember. So just a quick review. We talked about how you can go into component type to select the individual edges, which is the lines, the vertex, which select the vertices or points, the face, which selects the individual faces themselves, and object mode to go back to our default, and to double click the move tool, which will allow us to turn on the soft selection so that we can select, if necessary. So we'll go back to our sphere, multiple faces, and a bit of a fallout for the purposes of sculpting or other options. And if we could turn this off at any time by choosing to turn off the soft select, which is right here. That's pretty much most of what I wanted to show, at least this time when it comes to selections. In the next tutorial, we're going to start talking about actual polygonal modeling tools. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and thank you for viewing.